Okay, this is from www.cs.cmu.edu. O.S.A, Office of Special Affairs, The Secret Charlie Igloo Alpha of Scientology. By the way, I noticed a lot of the department names at the Charlie Igloo Alpha in the book that I'm reading are very similar to Office of Special Affairs. Chapter 12, O.S.A, Office of Special Affairs, The Secret C.I.A. of Scientology. Remember one thing, we are not running a business. We are running a government. We are in direct control of people's lives. L. Ron Hubbard Policy Letter of 5 August 1959. By the mid-1960s, Scientology was a religion under siege. In the U.S., the church had been raided by the FDA. Interesting. In England, Scientology was being investigated by Parliament, and St. Hill students lived in danger of being deported. The Australian inquiry was underway, and there were tremors from South Africa. Hubbard had been deported from Rhodesia. But he still has a street named after him. Interesting. And was under constant FBI surveillance at St. Hill, allegedly. Predisposed to paranoia, Hubbard was not one to remain on the defensive for long. Don't ever defend, always attack, he wrote. If attacked on some vulnerable point by anyone or anything, or any organization, always find or manufacture enough threat against them to cause them to sue for peace. Kind of reminds me of the last act Mike Rinder did against Aaron Smith Levin. Doesn't that remind you guys of that? Evidence of the war mentality promoted by Hubbard in Highly Contagious, that's a divide and conquer, within Scientology is a policy written by Hubbard called The War, in which he announced, "You may not realize it, but there is only one small group that has hammered Dianetics and Scientology for 18 years. The press attacks, the public upsets you receive, were generated by this one group. Last year, we isolated a dozen men at the top. This year, we found the organization these used and all its connections over the world." Hubbard claimed that a group of 12 men associated with the World Bank, interesting there, you guys, had set up psychiatry and the mental health movement as a vehicle to undermine and destroy the West. And this 12-man conspiracy was the real source of all opposition to Scientology. In February of 1966, Lord Balliol of the English House of Commons called for an investigation into Scientology. Let's see where this goes, you guys. Hubbard responded by setting up the Public Investigations Section at St. Hill for the purpose of helping LRH Hubbard investigate public matters and individuals which seem to impede human liberty. Can you guys imagine the nerve? It's like double talk. I think that's what Hubbard was doing, was that double talk, which seemed to impede human liberty and to furnish intelligence. There's that word again. Intelligence just keeps coming up over and over. By the late 60s, the Public Investigations Section had evolved into the Guardian's Office, a separate and unique agency within Scientology, which became Hubbard's Private Intelligence Bureau, a private CIA within the church. Don't you guys find that very interesting? Do you think Hubbard devised that all by himself, right? Hubbard appointed his wife, Mary Sue, as comptroller, or head of the newly formed Guardian's Office, which was headquartered at St. Hill. The Guardian's Office had 6 bureaus. 1, legal, which handled litigation involving Scientology. 2, public relations and media relations. That's what Rinder used to do, right? Allegedly. 3, information, including the controversial overt and covert data collection and operations sections. 4, social coordination, establishing the many Scientology front organizations. How is this different than all these various mafias out here? Can somebody explain that to me? 5, service for training GO staff members and, like children. And number 6, finance. Branch 1 of the Information Bureau, called B1, was the real nerve center of the GO, where files were maintained on all Scientologists, like kids, as well as on every perceived enemy of the organization. Illegal as well as legal means of obtaining information were sanctioned in a Scientology policy letter called Regarding Intelligence. The following are given as possibilities for collecting data. Listen to this, LAPD. 1, infiltration. 2, bribery. 3, buying information. 4, robbery. Wonder what Rathburn knows about that one. 5, blackmail. Who's the guy who sued Scientology? Jerry Armstrong? In discussing the criminal policies of the Guardian's Office, it is important to remember the frame of reference from which Scientologists, like children, operate and from which these policies were conceived. From a Scientology perspective, the world is in great danger of nuclear extinction. There's the fear. We've got to always inject the fear. Like the other religions, it's always like the last days. It's always revelation. And Scientology exists as the only deterrent to this terrible inevitability. To a Scientologist, Scientology is the elite organization on this planet, superior to all other Earth organizations. The Scientology system of ethics, based on the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics. Funny how all these cults operate in the exact same way. You always have to put the group over individual needs every single time. Does this sound familiar? The last 6 years? Greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics is therefore superior to any system of WOG law. Transgressions of WOG law, apparently the FBI and the Department of Justice, Child Protective Services, Department of Health, Department of Education, none of them could get a hold of these policies. Transgressions of WOG law, necessary to further the ends of Scientology, are sanctioned on the basis of the greatest good. In this way, lying, stealing, burgling, and a host of other crimes become justified as means to the end of saving mankind. Shielded by this philosophy, Scientologists have over the years been involved in a staggering array of crimes. Listen to that, LAPD. Clearwater PD. Most unbecoming to members of a church. It is a fact that Scientologists, particularly members of the GO, are trained to lie in a policy called Intelligence Specialist Training Routine, TRL, which stands for Training Routine Lie. The student, like a child, everyone, is trained to outflow false data effectively. That is also covered in the How to Train an Illuminati Mind-Controlled Slave. In the satanic cults, they teach them how to lie very well at a young age. In the drill, the student has to tell a lie, which is then challenged by a coach who works with the student until the student becomes able to lie facilely. The ability to lie convincingly is used by the Scientologist in a variety of situations, including the giving of courtroom testimony. A Scientologist feels no obligation to be truthful in a WOG court, even under oath. Again, this is because the Scientologist is operating under a higher law, that of the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics. Another Scientology policy contains a series of drills used to train guardian office agents. O.S.A, basically. The student has to choose the best of several alternative solutions. A. General scene. Person to restrain or remove. Where have we seen that before, you guys? To restrain or remove Mr. Jones, employee in local government agency, attacking the org. I mean, and it's so exaggerated. Anytime you speak about the crimes or the abuses, that's considered an attack. 1. Order hundreds of dollars worth of liquor in Jones' name and have it delivered to his home to cause him trouble and make the liquor store owner dislike him. Says, from L. Ron Hubbard, the alcoholic, of course. 2. Call up Jones' boss and accuse Jones of being a homosexual. I heard one of the ex-Scientologists said that happened to her. I think it was, or no, it was actually, I believe Marty Rathbun's wife that happened to. Three, send Jones' boss evidence of Jones accepting bribes on his job, with copies to police and local FBI. You see that? And we're all supposed to believe that all these agencies and the police don't know anything about what's going on. Please. B. General scene. A psychiatrist who has investigated attacks on the org via police and press. 1. Expose his not C background to the press with evidence that he still attends local not C meetings. 2. Wake him up every night by calling him on the phone and threatening him. 3. Send a field staff member in to be a patient of his for a year to disperse the psych during sessions. C is in Charlie. General scene. A newspaper executive, Clyde McDonald, who is behind local attacks. 1. Listen to this, LAPD. 1. Poison him while he's asleep, so he'll never start another attack. Wonder if that's what happened to that boat guy in Florida, that apparently Rathburn had some interactions with the boatman in Florida, Clearwater, Florida, who did not want to sell his boat to Scientology. Just ended up dead. Maybe he got R-247. 2. Make known to the paper's owner that McDonald is responsible for the paper's decreasing advertising revenues. 3. Spread a rumor around to the paper's employees that McDonald is a communist. 4. Put itching powder in McDonald's clothes so he'll scratch himself all day, thus preventing him from writing a story. And if these plans seem far-fetched, an example of a Scientology operation actually carried out is the one against Paulette Cooper. That's what I was thinking. Who in 1971 wrote a book critical of Scientology. Highly recommend you guys go out and buy that book. It's really good. In church documents labeled Operation PC Paulette Cooper Freakout, interesting how they label it the same way that a C.I.A. agency would label an operation. Various scenarios were listed. In one scenario, a Scientologist impersonating Cooper was to make threatening phone calls to an Arab consulate. Another plan was to mail a threatening letter to the same consulate or to make a BOMB threat against them. In still another plot, a Scientologist impersonating Cooper would go to a laundromat and threaten to K then President Nixon or Henry Kissinger. Yet another plan was to get Paulette's fingerprints on a piece of paper, then type a bomb, threat to Kissinger on the paper and mail it. And you guys know how much time all those Scientologists got when they were caught? You'd think they'd be in prison for a while or jail. They only got 5 years. I mean, obviously they were under like heavy mind control, but still. Something very similar to this was, in fact, carried out. Interesting how Rinder never went to jail for that, though, did he? Neither did Rathburn. Carried out, GO agents succeeded in getting Paulette's fingerprints on some stationery. Then used the stationery to make BOMB threats against the church. Cooper was indicted on 3 counts of making BOMB threats and faced 15 years in jail before she cleared herself by taking a sodium pentothal test. I don't know if I said that right. Cooper was completely exonerated only when the FBI, in their 1977 raid on the GO offices, remember they saw the kids too. Go read Jamie X's book. When they raided the buildings up there in Los Angeles and saw the terrible state of the children, they didn't do anything to help the kids. Nothing. Raid of the GO offices in Washington, D.C., in Los Angeles, California, uncovered documents which detailed the church's plan to frame her. Paulette Cooper's situation is not unique. Many people who have incurred the wrath of the Church of Scientology have found to what extent Scientologists are prepared to go in fighting the enemy. There's always got to be an enemy, you guys. In one case, a woman found thousands of worms thrown at her front door. Defectors have been harassed by church agents, spreading lies about them to employers or neighbors. Tori Magoo talked about that. Endless, frivolous lawsuits have been launched, and they still are. In one case, Boston attorney Michael Flynn narrowly avoided a crash when water was put in the gas tank of his private plane. And guess what, you guys? Nobody was ever tried or went to jail for it. Does anybody wonder why that is? A lot of you guys will just say, oh, it's because they have money. I believe it's way deeper than that. I mean, them having access to all that untaxed money does have something to do with it, but I believe there's more. The FBI raids brought to light many of the written policies used to train GO members. Apparently they didn't get any of the ones that subject the children to heinous abuse, though. In criminal activities, one such policy is security and theft of materials, which contains the following quotes. I wonder what Moxon thinks about that. Aren't lawyers supposed to abide by certain standards and ethics? I mean, we all know how it goes in our world, but the first step in any breaking and entering job. Listen to that, LAPD. How about that? Breaking and entering job is casing. This consists of checking out the area to ascertain the possibilities for breaking into the premises. Excuse me. Professionals at all times wear gloves during an operation. This prevents fingerprints being left behind, by which the agents could be traced. One trick used by professionals is a series of cover stories are mocked up, like how everyone mocks their own mind up, invented, to cover each stage of the operation in the event that the operation is blown at any point. If you are picked up by the police, don't say anything more than you are required to by law, which is usually your name and address. Additionally, any agent working on such operations would have nothing in his possession that connected him with the organization, Scientology. And so forth. An interesting policy letter for a church. Another GO policy called the strike defines a strike as the action of gathering information on a covert basis, performed by one or more agents. You know, Scientologists making, what, $47 a week? And back in those days, what was it, 20? An example of a strike actually carried out by the church was breaking into the IRS offices in Washington, D.C., and photocopying all files related to Scientology. A policy called walk-ins gives more detailed instructions for breaking and entering. Instructions are given in this policy for various aspects of burglarizing an office building. How to break into a locked Xerox machine. How to break into a locked door using a credit card. How to fashion a metal tool for breaking into a lock. How to use a strand of wire to break into a lock. How to break into a combination lock, etc. This policy comes complete with illustrations. I wonder if there's policies over at the CIA offices for these kinds of things. Just wondering. In a policy called B&E's, Breaking and Entering, the writer comments that some of our most successful collections actions fall into this category. A good GO agent is also trained to bug and debug telephones in the policy called regarding debugging. This policy, also illustrated, gives techniques for bugging and debugging phones, describes the 4 common types of bugs used, and explains the difference between a bug and a tap and how to deal with each. Most Scientologists are unaware that their supposedly confidential auditing files, you know, the PC files. You guys see all the Scientologists walking around in boxes, with boxes? That's partly what they have. Are forwarded to the GO where? So there again, there's more evidence that Mike Rinder did see all those files, as did Rathburn and a lot of these executives. Should they defect from the organization, the folders will be systematically culled for information which can be used to intimidate or blackmail them. Wasn't what Diddy was doing like blackmailing to the 9th degree? Most Scientologists are unaware of GO Policy 121669 called Program Intelligence Internal Security, which states, operating targets to make full use of all files of the organization to affect your major target. These include personnel files, ethics files, training files, processing files, and requests for refunds. Because, all churches need requests for refunds forms, right? The fact that a person's auditing or processing files, like a child, may contain sensitive personal information given to an auditor, like a child auditor, under assurances of confidentiality is reflected in some of the reports generated by the GO from these folders. In one such report, information gathered on a disaffected Scientologist includes: while at the Scientology org, she was promiscuous. There they go. They're fixated with calling women whores and prostitutes. They're like obsessed with it. She slept with 4 or 5 men, even though she was 15. I'm just adding that in there. During the course, 2 of them on the org premises. She has quite a record of promiscuity, even though that she's 15. With 3 male pre-clears. She let them, I don't want to say it on YouTube, let them touch blank, blank, blank during sessions, which means they had it on film. She had M'd regularly. Listen to this one, you guys. Pay very close attention to this. See that? She has M'd regularly since she was 8 years old. Since she was 8. We all know what that comes from. Mentions doing it once with coffee grounds. And once had a puppy. Another such report includes the names of the person's children and the items. Several self-induced abortions, C.I.A, which nobody else in the outside world uses that word. Because we all know that L. Ron Hubbard was regularly consulting with a psychiatrist. Just so everyone's clear on that. Saw a psych due to alcoholism problems, said from the biggest alcoholic on earth, L. Ron Hubbard. Drug history, and again, he liked to do drugs as well. Librium, Valium, LSD, opium, heroin, son is in jail, etc. In 1973, Hubbard authored, allegedly, a plan for the GO called Snow White, instructing the GO to gain access to all federal agencies to obtain their files on Scientology. The name of this operation derived from Hubbard's opinion that once these agencies had their files cleaned, they would be Snow White. Infiltrating or penetrating these agencies was achieved by having a Scientology agent obtain employment at an agency, then use his credentials to gain access to desired materials in the agency's files. A report called Compliance Report lists 136 such agencies targeted for penetration, prioritized by a star system, i.e. low priority, 2 stars higher priority, and 3 stars highest priority. Guess this is how they're going to save the world, huh? Some of the 3-star agencies listed in this report are the AEC, the CIA, the FBI, the FTC, the FDA, the IRS, the NSA, the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Army, the U.S. Attorney General, the DEA, the U.S. Coast Guard. Almost sounds like some type of government experiment. The U.S. Coast Guard, the U.S. Department of Justice, the U.S. Department of Labor, the U.S. Department of State, the U.S. Department of Treasury, the U.S. House of Representatives, the U.S. Department of Immigration and Naturalization, the U.S. Marshal's Office, the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Post Office, the U.S. Selective Service, and the U.S. Senate. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, and I do still need to look all this up, but if I remember correctly, people committing crimes or attacking federal agencies is the highest kind of crime that anyone could do in the United States. And the people that participated in it only got 5 years. Weird. Allegedly. I wonder if they only had to do like time served. Like, I wonder if a lot of those people only did like half of the time. In this report, several agencies such as the IRS, the DEA, the U.S. Coast Guard, and the U.S. Department of Labor are marked done. Another policy called Safe U.S. details plans to get agents into the U.S. Attorney's offices in Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles, into the IRS Office of International Operations, into the headquarters of the AMA, and into various state and local district attorneys' offices. In a policy concerning the World Federation of Mental Health, called Compliance Report GO 121569, the writer states that everything possible was done to collect the data. You know, they don't mention the name, of course. Everything from infiltrating to stealing to eavesdropping, etc. I guess that's how they're going to save the world, everyone. The GO used a complex system of coding, especially in any written communications involving criminal or illegal activities. In policies such as the correct use of codes and recoding wording of messages, GO staff members are instructed to code the following: incriminating undercover activities and the like, such as violations of our status as a tax-exempt nonprofit organization, subversive activities, covert operations, and money deals that might provoke government tax offices. Things that we want unknown as connected to the Church of Scientology, i.e., secret front groups. Words that would dispute the fact that the Church of Scientology's motives are humanitarian, i.e., harass, eradicate, attack, destroy, annihilate, entrapment. Admission to unpunished crimes and or incriminating data. Mentions of the ordering of a B and E, breaking and entering. Implications of posing as a government agent. Evidence of tapping phone lines or illegal taping of conversations. mentions of harassment, any evidence of bribery, wordings like, let's wipe him out, etc. Another set of GO policies here to do with disposing of incriminating documents. Quickly, should the org be raided by the FBI or other government agency? One policy describes a system known in the GO as the red box. This policy gives instructions for keeping all GO documents related to incriminating activities in a special folder or briefcase called the red box that can be quickly destroyed in case of a raid. Another policy called basic and essential security. Can't help but think of when everybody kept barking at everyone about essential employees. Do you guys remember that? Just saying. Basic and essential security instructs the GO staff member, like a kid, well, maybe not a kid, I don't know, to be able to destroy all such incriminating material within 30 to 60 seconds. That's also another federal crime broken right there. Destruction by fire is usually most thorough and practical. Probably the easiest and least expensive method is to purchase a metal container, some lighter fluid, and have matches on hand. Especially illuminating is the course. There's that word, you guys. Remember what I said? Especially illuminating is the course check sheet for the information full had. The course used to train GO agents. Included on this course are the following: to read a book on brainwashing. How interesting is that? So these O.S.A guys, they know about the brainwashing. They're in it to win it with their $1,000, $2,000 suits. To read a book on brainwashing. To be able to define the following words: spy, spying, agent, operative, information intelligence, espionage, counter-espionage, counterintelligence, fascism, socialism, communism, CIA, FBI, M16, M15, KGB, GRU. To write an essay on what could happen if intelligence, there's that word again, were not anonymous or elusive. To read the following policy letters written by Hubbard, allegedly. Terror stalks. What an interesting word terror is. We never heard that word before, have we? Never had the pants scared off of us with the word terror, have we? Communism and Scientology, the war. PDH, pain, drugs, hypnosis. That correlates to the book I'm reading about Gottlieb, Poisoner in Chief. Intelligence, the art of building a cover. Covert Operations 1, Covert Operations 2, Black PR. Secret notes on SMERSH, SMERSH, etc. Other books read on the course include The Spy and His Master, KGB, CIA, and the Cult of Intelligence. Psychological Warfare Against Nazi Germany, and The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Oh, yeah. American agencies and governmental officials were very quick to bring a lot of the higher ranking Nazi officers, and I call them mad scientists, psychopaths, with the chemical warfare and various mind control programs. They couldn't wait to get them to the United States. Surprising, I know. A sample of the 100 of drills on this course. Demo a covert operation on an opponent, which restrains him in the beneficial result. Demo why it is important to know your public's hate and love buttons. Huh, where have we seen that before, you guys? Huh. Know the public's hate and love buttons. Weird. When running an operation on an enemy. Write an essay on what you would do if, while running operations on an opponent, the opponent begins to run a black propaganda campaign on you. Write up an operation in which the agent carrying out the operation would need a pretty good cover. Demo how knowing the enemy makes for a better operation than being ignorant of the enemy. Also included on this check sheet is TRL, Training Routine Lie. Again, an interesting course for a church. Unquestionably, the most spectacular operations carried out by GO agents were those connected to Operation Snow White, in which scores of government offices were burglarized in an attempt to retrieve every government file on Scientology. These operations resulted in some 30,000 government documents being either copied or stolen. Unfortunately for the Scientologists, they also resulted in the arrest and imprisonment of 11 Scientologists, including Hubbard's wife. Typical coward, right? Typical coward. Michael Meisner, as assistant guardian for the Bureau of Information, was chosen to supervise this operation. He selected a GO staff member, Gerald Wolf, to infiltrate the IRS in Washington, D.C. Wolf, codenamed Silver, was hired as a clerk typist with the IRS in May of 1975. From May of 1975 until June of 1976, Wolf and Meisner used Wolf's ID card, as well as 5 forged ID cards, burglarized offices of the IRS Chief Counsel, several IRS attorneys, the IRS Exemptions Office, the Tax Division of the U.S. Justice Department, the Deputy General of the U.S., the IRS Office of Intelligence Operations, the Department of Justice Information and Privacy Unit, and the Interpol Liaison Office. You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of like a mind control experiment, and also some type of like an operation to see how people could break into these governmental agency offices so they could foolproof it. Meisner and Wolf were able to pull off their astonishingly successful burglaries for over a year. A suspicious library clerk alerted the authorities. In June of 1976, Wolf was caught by the FBI with one of the forged ID cards, for which he was arrested and prosecuted. Meisner managed to flee prosecution for a year, during which time he was held prisoner by the GO. Apparently, that memo never got to the LAPD ever. They never heard of that. Until he managed to escape and defected to the FBI. Yeah, the children are not allowed to leave, though, you see. This guy was held prisoner as an adult, which is bad enough. But the children in Scientology, they don't have that option. A month after Meisner's defection, the FBI launched surprise raids against the GO offices in Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles, seizing thousands of documents, including most of those previously stolen from the government offices. As a result of this evidence obtained in the raids, 11 GO officials were indicted, and 9 of the 11 served prison sentences ranging from 6 months to 5 years. Okay, I take it back, you guys. Some of them, the sentences range from 6 months to 5 years. I mean, I guess it would depend on the severity of what you did, but if I remember correctly, Mary Sue Hubbard was the one who masterminded it, but I'd have to go back and do more research, but I think I'm sure LRH was completely in the loop. They always need a fall person, don't they? Mary Sue Hubbard, as head of the GO, was fined $10,000 and given a 5-year prison sentence for her part in the illegal operations. Although she pleaded for leniency, she was told by the judge, I have to screenshot that. We have a precious system of government in the United States. Apparently, apparently we do for some people, but not the little children in Scientology. Fuck them. For anyone to use those laws, or to seek under the guise of those laws, to destroy the very foundation of the government, is totally wrong and cannot be condoned by any responsible citizen. Mary Sue Hubbard reported to Federal Correctional Institution in Lexington, Kentucky, where she served 1 year of her term before being released. Shortly after her release from prison, she was ousted from her position as head of the Guardian's office by the new leadership. You know, the new leadership with no name. Probably Davy Miscavige. Her present whereabouts remain unknown. The Guardian's office was renamed the Office of Special Affairs by the new church leadership. Davy. In the mid-1980s, in an effort to shed the tarnished image of the GO, because they commit federal crimes, no big deal, right? But like the tiger unable to change its stripes, O.S.A. is simply the old GO with a new name. Strange activities for a church. True, not every church comes with its own information and intelligence agency. Sure doesn't. But apparently, what I'm learning, they all use the same methods, all of them. Especially when it comes to pedophilia. All the same. Pedos on one side of the fence, the pedos usually have the money. And then all the abused children that grow up and try to get some justice. Always the same. True, not every church comes with its own information and intelligence agency. illustrated instructions for burglary, espionage training, and its own corps of highly trained secret agents. Yeah, don't you wonder if there were other people or other agencies influencing L. Ron Hubbard? Don't you wonder that? He didn't seem smart enough to me to put something like that together. It is the siege mentality of Scientology, the idea of us against them. Let's talk about the Pink Floyd song, Us and Them. That's what that's about. That helps to maintain a high degree of unity within the cult. Except when it comes to the children. The GO was formed to deal with the many real and perceived enemies. Perceived enemies, that's important. Of Scientology. Those are just people that ask questions. This enemy mentality in Scientology was born from the paranoid lobes of Hubbard's mind. And it is this mentality which makes the GO, and now O.S.A, the danger that it is. I wish they would have talked about the dead agenting. I'm just going to read like the beginning of the notes. The Church of Scientology is engaged in a public relations campaign to present itself to the citizens of Clearwater as a legitimate, law-abiding, non-profit religious organization, while actually operating in disregard and in violation of civil and criminal laws. Oh, don't worry, they got the cops on speed dial. Didn't you guys know? And some of the government officials. The actual conduct of the Church of Scientology, adopted as written corporate policy, includes the following: 1, burglary; 2, larceny; infiltration; 4, smear campaigns; 5, extortion; 6, blackmail; 7, frame-ups; 8, deceptive sales and recruitment policies. That's another federal crime. 9, deceptive uses of legal releases and bonds. 10, suppression of free speech and association. 11, deviation from acceptable standards of medical practice and educational requirements. 12, use of tax-exempt funds for unlawful purposes. Well, how about that? That's why you guys had probably seen that video that I posted regarding one of the Clearwater governing officials that is like endorsing, right now as we speak, endorsing Scientology. And I said, I labeled it as endorsing unlawful Scientology. I think it sits at 13 views. There's a reason I don't get as many views as I'd like to get. 13, overtly fraudulent policies designed to extract large sums of money from unwitting and uninformed individuals. 14, extortionate and or improper use of highly personal information fraudulently procured from individuals based on false promises of confidentiality. 15, the use of unlawful and covertly harassing means to prevent individuals who have been defrauded from obtaining legal redress. 16, and the use of overtly fraudulent policies, such as the minister's mock-up and religious image check sheet, to present a religious front to the public while actually engaged in the business of unlicensed psychotherapy for the purpose of making money. Final report to the Clearwater hearings, 1983. By the autumn of 1975, Hubbard knew that the Sea Org's days at sea had come to an end. The ports of the Caribbean were proving just as unfriendly as those of the Mediterranean. Because, yeah, people hate them. They know it's a white slave ship. The final straw came when the Apollo was ordered out of the port of Curaçao by the Dutch Prime Minister, who referred to the Apollo as the ship of fools. It is also possible that Hubbard, still convalescing from his latest and most serious heart attack, I guess the smoking, what do you say? Smoking doesn't cause lung cancer? I'm sure the smoking, contributed to that. Was himself feeding the need for a more stable and permanent place to roost. So in October of 1975, the Sea Org came ashore. The crew, like children. See how they always omit the word child or children. Go check out, what's her name again? The Gillum book. She talks about being a child slave on that ship. The crew was divided into groups and traveled as inconspicuously as possible. One group to New York, another to Washington, D.C., and a third group to Miami, where they established flag relay offices in the existing orgs. A fourth group took up residence in a motel at Daytona Beach, Florida, while scouts were sent to locate a suitable property for a flag land base. Hubbard, who traveled from the Bahamas with his aides, you see how they don't talk about the aides are kids? You guys know his aides were children, right? I don't know where the chapter of this book is. I'm going to find out. With his aides bearing false passports and $1 million in cash, was temporarily situated in another motel in Daytona, not far from his crew. Oh, no, they weren't crew. They were child slaves. I'm going to rephrase that. Not far from his child slaves. Facts. The scouts soon returned with good tidings. An ideal property had been found in Clearwater, a sleepy tourist town on the west coast of Florida. The name Clearwater would have a certain appeal to a Scientologist. A decision was soon made to buy the old Fort Harrison Hotel in downtown Clearwater. Yeah, another hotel of darkness. Another hotel of darkness. The owners of the hotel were approached by representatives of the Southern Land Development and Leasing Corporation, who said they represented United Churches of Florida. You see how they weren't even honest about who they were? Who wished to buy the property. The hotel was purchased for $2.3 million in cash, and a nearby bank building was also purchased for $550,000 in cash. Reporters asking who was behind Southern Land Development and United Churches were told only that purchases were made by a property investor who wished to remain anonymous. As they knew that people didn't like Scientology. That's my opinion. United Churches, they were told, was a nonprofit organization dedicated to church unity, which would be sponsoring a series of Sunday morning radio broadcasts by local clergy. The Sea Org began to occupy their new headquarters. Swarms of uniformed Scientologists were suddenly visible on the streets of downtown Clearwater as they moved between the two buildings with cleaning and painting supplies. My opinion, it's like a hostile takeover in a way. And you know that those were child slaves doing all the cleaning. You know it and I know it. An uneasy suspicion was beginning to grow regarding the new tenants of the Fort Harrison Hotel. Clearwater Mayor Gabe Casares voiced the perplexity felt by many when he stated, "I am discomfited by the increasing visibility of security personnel armed with billy clubs and mace employed by the United Churches of Florida. I am unable to understand why this degree of security is required by a religious organization." Yeah, inquiring MF minds want to know. We all want to know. Meanwhile, two reporters, Bet Orsini of the St. Petersburg Times and Mark Sabelman of the Clearwater Sun, were beginning to discover that Southern Land Development and United Churches of Florida didn't seem to exist. Nowhere was there a record of either organization. Bet Orsini of the St. Petersburg Times was the first to make the connection to Scientology. But just as the paper was about to print the truth, a Scientology spokesman from Los Angeles, Arthur Marin, arrived in Clearwater and announced to the press that it was the controversial Church of Scientology which had purchased the buildings. Imagine, what everyone there felt. You have money, you could just push your way around. Pedophiles and all. At first, he denied that the hotel would become a Scientology center. He said that the hotel would be open to all churches for conferences and retreats. However, the next day he said that if Scientology failed to bring religious harmony to all religions, then the hotel would become a center for Scientologists. And a few days later, he admitted that the center was to be used exclusively for Scientology training. After telling the people of Clearwater that Scientologists were nice, friendly people who wanted to fit in with the community, Scientology launched lawsuits against Gabe Casares and the St. Pete Times, both of whom responded with countersuits of their own against the church. Hubbard, meanwhile, was ensconced in a suite of apartments in the nearby town of Dunedin. But not for long. He engaged the services of a local tailor who happened to be a science fiction fan. In the course of conversation, Hubbard revealed his identity. The tailor spread the news to his wife and friends, and before long, a reporter showed up outside Hubbard's door. Panic-stricken, Hubbard immediately fled the scene with two aides, probably kids, who drove him to safety in Washington, D.C. That's an interesting city for Hubbard to go to, don't you guys think? Weird. Washington, D.C. So Washington, D.C. is safe? The Fort Harrison Hotel was being advertised as the Mecca of technical perfection and was becoming a place where well-to-do Scientologists from all over the world could come and receive the very best that Scientology had to offer. I want to interject here that the Flag land base, with all the auditing that they offer, the majority of those auditors are children. working 14 to 18-hour days. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, thank God for the child labor that can pay those Clearwater PD their extra overtime and security details. And what was it, the politicians that are endorsing Scientology? The public pre-clears would fly in from Los Angeles, Zurich, Frankfurt, or Mexico City. They would pay the huge fees, play backgammon, swim, sunbathe. Oh, I want to add in here. You know that the children were working in those hotels to make sure that the wealthy Scientologists were taken care of. You guys know that, right? Y'all know that? Well, I do. Listen to tapes by Hubbard and be given special PR briefings by a smartly uniformed host or attractive PR girls. Notice they didn't even bother to say women or attractive PR girls. Do you guys see the word woman in there anywhere? Let me make sure here. Look at this. Attractive PR girls. Otherwise known as minors, everyone. In case nobody knew what that was. Diners in the Hourglass restaurant, which is part of the Fort Harrison Hotel, were and are to this day served by waiters with black suits. You know, children. Bow ties and crisp white shirts. They're not crisp. They're only allowed like 1 or 2 uniforms, and they have to keep washing the same uniforms over and over. And we've all seen them. Most of them, their uniforms don't fit right. And I'm not like shading them, but that's how it is. The talk would usually drift to the great wins each was having in his auditing. You know, in between blackmail materials. The Guardian's office was also hard at work in Clearwater. Oh, so Rinder and Rathburn and what's the other guy's name? Armstrong. I don't know if, yeah, Armstrong was still in then. They were all part of that. Gabe Casades, who had by now become an official enemy of the church, because he asked questions, was the subject of an extensive investigation referred to by the GO as Operation Tacoless. Is that a racial slur, everyone? Is that a racial slur? Gabe Casades, of some type of Hispanic origin. That sounds like a racial slur, doesn't it? It does. The GO investigation of Casades is of interest because it shows to what lengths Scientology would go in investigating anyone they perceive to be an enemy. In other words, someone who asks questions or speaks out about their S abuse, their child abuse, their physical abuse, their neglect, the women that are being AR'd in there, those guys, yeah. In the write-up of this operation, the major target was stated as to ensure that all investigative leads and stirrings left unpulled on Major Casades are followed up on to discover further data about him which, when released, will ruin his political career and restrain him as an opponent of Scientology. Imagine that any of these government officials would endorse Scientology after they did this to this man. They know. Some of the steps included in their investigation of Casades were: one, compile a list of all clubs, associations, organizations, etc., which Gabe is or has been a member of, or which he publicly supports. Obtain membership lists to these groups. 2. Compile a list of all the people who have written letters in the press in support of Casades Investigate any people who show up in both of these lists. 3. Conduct interviews under suitable guise with people at Bedford Air Force Base in Massachusetts to see what can be dug up about Casares. Don't you need special privileges to get on most military bases? When I was in, you did. You had to have some type of clearance. Weird. 4. Obtain property records in El Paso to see which property is owned by Casares or his wife. Well, perhaps he's of Mexican descent. Interview the inhabitants of the house to see what can be learned about the Casares. 5. Locate and investigate all of Casares' relatives, including Arthur, Joseph, Edmond Casares brothers, and Cora P., Marjorie C., and Soledad A. sisters. They should be investigated to find any scandal or criminal backgrounds they or their family may have. 6. Investigate any unknown property deals of Gabe or his wife. Sounds like the background check I had to get before I went in the military. Interesting. 7. Check the backgrounds of Gabe's parents in Mexico and the circumstances of their coming to this country. 8. Check the name of Gabe's first wife, when and where divorced, and why. 9. Check grammar and high school records of Gabe. 10. Check all financial disclosure forms for the disbursement of his campaign funds. Check campaign contributors. Ensure that he keeps within the letter of the law regarding contributions. You guys don't think that Scientology is blackmailing some of these folks we see? You don't think? You don't think they're blackmailing some of the cops? Wakey, wakey. 11. Obtain a copy of Gabe's military records. 12. Check political backgrounds and affiliations of all Casares campaign staff, looking for people with commie or heavy leftist backgrounds, or with backgrounds which will discredit Casares. 13. Obtain marriage records for the first marriage of Casares' wife and also the records of the divorce. Apparently, the GO didn't come up with much as a result of the investigation, so they changed their tack. A plan was made to frame Casares in a hit-and-run accident designed to ruin his political career, which it nearly did. You guys, I talked about the accidents before. Car accidents, plane accidents. Those two are top favorites of these elite people. It was known that Casares was to attend a mayor's conference in Washington, D.C. Was Hubbard still up in Washington, D.C.? He was met at the airport by a young man posing as a reporter and his female friend. Both were Scientologists. The female, a GO agent named Sharon Thomas, volunteered to show Gabe the sights of the city, which Gabe gladly accepted. This poor guy, he didn't even know. Sick. As they were driving through Rock Creek Park, Sharon, who was driving, hit a pedestrian who crumpled on the ground behind the car. The pedestrian was GO agent Michael Meisner, who, of course, was not seriously hurt. See what they do? Sharon drove on without stopping to see if the pedestrian had been hurt. Somehow this event was leaked to the press, yes, somehow, and made its way into the headlines in Clearwater, costing Casares his election as a congressional candidate. They just screwed his political career. They ruined him utterly. Can't help but think of Rinder, the things he was saying about Aaron. Weird. The GO had also drawn up plans to have someone in Mexico forge a document that Casares had been married in Mexico 25 years earlier, making his current marriage bigamous. You know, like L. Ron Hubbard. This operation was apparently never carried out. Good. The Guardian's office did manage, however, to seriously disrupt Casares' political career and to make life quite miserable for him and for his wife for a number of years. Casares' lawsuit against the church was settled out of court in the mid-1980s. The GO was involved at the same time in a complex series of plans known as Operation Goldmine, in which Scientology funds were to be spent in taking over the town of Clearwater. In one part of this plan, called Power Project 3 Normandy, the major target was given as to fully investigate the Clearwater City and County area so we can distinguish our friends from our enemies and handle as needed. Some of the steps in this plan were: 1. Locate all local medical societies, clinics, hospitals, etc. Gather the names of the main officials and directors of each. Fully investigate each one and recommend handling. 2. Locate all local intelligence agencies. There's that word again. E.g. police, intelligence, FBI office, etc. Interesting. Gather the names of the heads of each. Fully investigate each one. Recommend handling. 3. Locate all local PR firms. Gather the names of the main officials and directors of each. Fully investigate each one and recommend handling. 4. Locate all local drug firms. Gather the names of officials and directors and fully investigate each. Recommend handling. Guess that's how they clear a planet. 5. For each government agency listed below, do the following. A. Locate the heads or senior officials in charge. B. Investigate each one for enemy connections. C. Compile a full report on each one with time track, a consecutive history of their lives. D. To each report, add your recommended handling of the person, i.e. operation, penetration, keep an eye on him, or he's a potential ally, etc. Do this in full for the following agencies. We should read this in front of the Clearwater City Council. Well, you know, parts of it. Like this part. Do this in full for the following agencies: City Council, City Health Department, City Mental Hygiene Department, City Building and Safety Department. You know, because they really got to work hard to protect that slave labor, don't they? City Police Department, City Consumer Affairs Office, City Attorney or Prosecuting Attorney, County Commissioners, County Health Department, County Mental Health Department, County Building and Safety Department, County Licensing Department, County Sheriff, County Attorney or Prosecutor, Florida State Attorney's Local Office, Board of Medical Examiners, Florida State Health Department, Florida State Mental Health Department, Florida State Senators, Local, Florida State Representatives, Local, local U.S. Congressmen, local U.S. Senators. You guys, this is much longer than I realized. So, I think if I read the whole thing, it's going to be like 3 or 4 hours. So, I'm going to go ahead and leave the link in the description box. It's very interesting. This should be forwarded to all government agencies, but you guys know. You know. They know. Okay, hit the like button, subscribe if you choose. I will leave a link in the description. Have a good day. Peace.